Burning Point.
Hello and welcome to the show. With me, Ekaterina Kudashkina. Israel has been making headlines throughout the week. On Tuesday, the country's Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, announced he was firing two ministers who openly disagreed with him on the Israeli statehood bill. This caused a government breakup to be followed by early general election in March next year. The breakup, in its turn, caused an uproar in Israel. According to the recent panel's research poll taken for the Jerusalem Post, 60% of Israelis want Netanyahu out. In the US, the key ally of Israel, as we all know, the reaction has been mixed. According to Debka-File, Netanyahu government's breakup is seen as golden opportunity to finally get rid of Mr. Netanyahu and bring Israel back to negotiations with the Palestinians, with the Obama administration, like the Debka-File puts it, finally chalking up a success. The U.S. Congress sent a different signal, passing the U.S.-Israel Strategic Partnership Act that reflects, and I quote, the sense of Congress that Israel is a major strategic partner of the United States and declares Washington's unwavering support for Israel as a Jewish state. Yet, the bill still needs to be signed by President Obama. However, is this step going to help Mr. Netanyahu out? Is it going to make a difference? And this is something we're discussing with our guest speaker, Professor Eyal Zisser of the Moshe Dayan Center for Eastern and African Studies.
Well, we have to admit that it's not that they are not important, but, they are more of a symbolic nature, and it has to do, I believe, with American politics. We know nowadays that there is maybe tension, maybe animosity, maybe competition between the U.S. Congress, led by the Republicans, and the White House, where President Obama is sitting. And Israel turned to be part of the debate. Because Obama is seen mainly because of his relations with Netanyahu as not very enthusiastic about Israel, and the Republicans want to put pressure on him on this issue. So it's part of the American politics to promote relations with Israel and to show how committed, given senator or congressman is to Israel. Of course, there is a basic alliance and good relations and friendship between Israel and the United States. But when you come to the question, why now, why this specific law, it has to do mainly, I believe, with American.
Is it going to somehow help Mr. Netanyahu?
Well, the issue here is, first of all, Netanyahu has many problems with the White House because he became too much involved in American politics, and he's seen as, a supporter of the Republican Party, which, of course, put him in a delicate position vis-a-vis the White House. To this, we need to add that, elections are approaching in Israel, and any Israeli knows that it's important, it's vital for the future of Israel to maintain good relations with the United States. So if Netanyahu will be seen by the Israeli voters as somebody who is damaging the relations, traditional relations between the United States and Israel, it wouldn't help him in the election day. That's why, it can help, but not really, I think, because it's of a symbolic nature, so it's not going to influence. Here in Israel, nobody pays too much attention because it has any practical meaning for the time being.
Sir, thank you so much. And just to remind you, that was Professor Eyal Zisser of the Moshe Dayan Center for Eastern and African Studies in Israel.
Burning Point.
Now, our next guest speaker, Dr. Alon Ben-Meir, a professor of international relations at the Center for Global Affairs at New York University, believes that Netanyahu's chances are zero. His weekly column is titled, How Netanyahu Committed Political Suicide. So we're proceeding to discuss the matter with our guest speaker, and I remind you, this is Dr. Alon Ben-Meir, a professor of international relations at the Center for Global Affairs at New York University.
Let me just begin by saying, Netanyahu has continued to be a very zealous ideologue who has had a very narrow view of really what Israel is all about. That is, he has all his life been focused on the Jewishness of the state, the need to maintain the Jewish identity of the state, and he has done many different things to ensure that, including, for example, maintaining the occupation, expanding the settlement, and even denying equal rights to the Israeli Arabs. And so many of these activities have been all geared toward maintaining the identity of the state. The bill that he wanted to introduce really doesn't change much because Israel is a Jewish state. It was created as a Jewish state in the partition plan in 1947. All of its symbols, anthem, are all Jewish and still has a Jewish majority. So the bill could not really have any dramatic change on the nature of the Jewishness of the state. But what it has done, however, or would have done, is to make it almost official or acceptable to discriminate against Jews living in Israel versus the non-Jews who live as citizens of Israel. This would have been the first implication. The second implication is that by demanding, for example, that Abbas and others recognize Israel as a Jewish state, also he's trying to enshrine that Israel, regardless of its demographic composition, remains a Jewish state. And so the implications of the bill are negative in every which way. And that is the reason two of his major coalition partners, the Hatnoah led by Tzipi Livni, the Yesh Atid led by Lapid, rejected in principle what he's been trying to achieve. And this is really what, in fact, precipitated the collapse of his government. But mind you, he's a very skilled politician. He's been feeling the pulse of the public. The collapse of the government is not sudden or surprising at all. I thought the government should have collapsed a year ago, or even more than that. I was wondering why it lasted even 2 years, because the composition of the coalition, the five main parties, simply really do not see eye to eye. So they pretty much settle on the lowest denominator when it comes to significant issues like the occupation, like the settlement, like security, and all of these matters that concern Israel, a future as a state. Hence, there was no progress, not on the political front, on the Palestinian peace process, not even on economic development, any other social front as far as Israel goes. So he precipitated the collapse of the government because he also seeing that the public is moving somewhat to the right, and he wants to capitalize on it and then form a government that would go along with him in every which way, and he will reintroduce this bill, and he hopes to pass it.
This is Burning Point. We're discussing the future of Israel and its Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Our guest speaker is Dr. Alon Ben-Meir, professor with the New York University. From what I've been reading from the expert opinions, I get an impression that he's also being criticized for moving too far to the right.
Yeah, the two are not contradictory. That is, there is discernible, based on polls taken recently, that the public is moving more to the right. But there's also a significant portion of the Israelis who criticize the government for moving much more to the right of center. So this is actually happening. Now, that does not necessarily mean that in 3 months down the line, the same political composition will remain so. That is, the Israelis are also thinking in terms of what has happened in the last 6 years under Netanyahu's leadership. The peace process did not progress a single iota. In fact, it's been reversed in so many different ways. Israel is more isolated today than ever before by the international community. Israel is becoming a garrison state. So many Israelis are looking also at the overall picture where Netanyahu brought Israel in the last 6 years. And many of them are unhappy. The problem in Israel is that the political system is extremely dysfunctional. And this is why he is able to capitalize on the dysfunctionality of the political system. Let me just explain that in a word or two. He has, as the Likud party has only 18, I repeat, 18 out of 120 parliamentarians in the Israeli parliament. Just 18. And then Lapid has even one more, has 19, who is a more centrist party. So you might ask, how is it possible for Netanyahu to form a government? But this is where he comes. Even before before he dismissed two ministers and dissolved the parliament, he already began negotiating with two religious parties and others to prepare for forming a new government, even before the election, 3.5 months before the election. Politically, he's very savvy. He knows how to maneuver. And unfortunately, the other thing is that there is no rising, visionary, courageous leaders in Israel that can actually challenge him. And that is really the plight of Israel and the reason why Israel has made little progress, if any, on a number of fronts. And that is, in my view, extraordinarily dangerous for Israel itself.
So how do we need to expect the situation to develop? I mean, there's, like you're saying, the peace process with Palestinians is stalled. The country is becoming a garrison state. And what then?
Time has come for all these parties, center and left of center, to get together as a single political body, leave their egos, the leaders of these parties, leave their egos aside, and try to think in terms of what is best for the state of Israel and for its future well-being, future security. That's what they're going to have to think about. If they manage to get together, and if they manage to establish a solid political agenda that makes peace with the Palestinians central to this new political party, they will pursue that vigorously and bring about an end to the occupation. I think there is a majority of Israelis who want to see an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but they don't see a single leader who's going to bring them to that destination. And that is what is necessary to be done. It is possible, but then again, it is going to require some of the leaders of various political parties, as I said, to put their ego aside, their personal ambition aside, because, Israel is made out of 7 million prime ministers. Everybody in Israel would like to be a prime minister. And that is really the plight, and I should even call it tragedy of the Israeli situation today. But again, they have to get together in order to pose a serious challenge to Netanyahu. And I think there is a good chance if they do so. But it is probably a long shot, as far as I can see it today. It could change, though.
Mr. Abbas, trying to pursue his own agenda unilaterally, influence the situation in Israel?
Well, there's no doubt. The Israelis may be dismissing some of what's going on in Europe and recognition by Sweden of Israel of the Palestinians. The vote in the French Parliament, the vote in the British Parliament to support, to recognize the Palestinian state. This is going to get more and more momentum throughout the European community, which is the greatest trading partner with Israel. They started to talk also about sanctions. So to be truth about the matter is that Netanyahu has left Abbas with no choices left. So Abbas has no alternative but to turn to the international community and seek their political support. He knows that if he went to the Security Council, the United States may still veto such a resolution to recognize the Palestinian state. So he's going to the international community, state by state. Europe is a key. If you have 10, 15 European countries recognize the Palestinian state, Israel is going to be in a major, major bind. And that's going to have serious repercussions on the Israeli public. However, they publicly may want to dismiss that, they cannot escape the fact that the world stands against them.
Sir, thank you so much. And just to remind you, this time our guest speaker was Dr. Alon Ben-Meir, Professor of International Relations at New York University. And with this, we end this edition of Burning Point, brought to you by me, Ekaterina Kudoshkina. Thank you so much for staying with us. Goodbye, and take care.